Right now, at this very moment, there's a woman living in the Pacific Northwest who hasn't slept through the night in 3 weeks. Every evening at exactly 11:47 p.m., she wakes to the sound of tapping on her windows. When she looks, there's no one there. But sometimes, just sometimes, she finds a handprint pressed against the glass. A wet handprint with water dripping down the pane. On her second-story window. Her friends think she's having a breakdown. Her family has started using that careful, concerned tone people reserve for those they believe are losing touch with reality. They want her to see someone, to talk to a professional, to take some time off work. But here's what they don't understand. Sarah Mitchell isn't losing her mind. She's being haunted by a choice she made. A single decision that seemed so harmless at the time. She took a shortcut. And on that shortcut she saw something. Something that's been waiting on that lonely road for decades, maybe longer. Something that doesn't want to hurt you, at least not in the way you might expect. It wants something far worse than your life. It wants to be acknowledged. It wants to be seen. And once you truly see it, once you look directly into its eyes and recognize its existence, it sees you back. Forever. Before I tell you what happened to Sarah that night, I need you to think about something. Have you ever been driving alone after dark and caught something in your peripheral vision? A shape that shouldn't have been there? A figure standing where no person should stand? Maybe you convinced yourself it was a shadow, a mailbox, a trick of the headlights cutting through fog. Maybe you pushed the gas pedal a little harder and turned up the radio to drown out the unease creeping up your spine. Maybe you got home safely and never thought about it again. But what if you had stopped? What if curiosity or concern had made you slow down, roll down your window, call out into the darkness? What if instead of dismissing what you saw, you had given it your full attention? Would you still be able to forget it? Or would it remember that moment when your eyes met, when you acknowledged it was real, when you opened that door between its world and yours? Sarah asked herself these questions too late. On a rainy October night, exhausted from working late and desperate to get home, she made a decision. The old hill road would cut 15 minutes off her drive. Everyone avoided it, sure, but Sarah had always assumed that was just small-town superstition, the kind of irrational fear that kept people taking the long way around when a perfectly good road sat empty and waiting. She turned onto that dark stretch of asphalt, and within minutes, her headlights illuminated something standing in the middle of the road. A woman in a white dress, soaking wet, perfectly still. A woman who tilted her head at an impossible angle and smiled with too many teeth. A woman who vanished the moment Sarah's panic peaked, disappearing as if she'd never existed at all. But she had existed. She does exist. And now, 3 weeks later, Sarah sees her everywhere. In reflections. In shadows. Standing at the end of hallways. Always watching. Always smiling. Always dripping water onto floors that should be dry. This is the story of what happened on the lonely road down the hill. This is the story of what's still happening to Sarah Mitchell right now as I speak these words to you. Because unlike most ghost stories, this one doesn't end. The woman in white doesn't go away. And Sarah is beginning to understand that she never will. Hello, my lovely night dwellers. Welcome back to Miss Creepy Face, where we explore the darkest corners of the unknown. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell because trust me, you don't want to miss what lurks in the shadows. Before we begin, a quick but important note. This story is a work of fiction created for your entertainment. All characters, events, and locations are products of imagination. Now let's dive into tonight's tale. Today's story takes us to a small town in the Pacific Northwest, where one woman's decision to take a shortcut turned into a nightmare that refuses to end. This is a story about convenience, consequences, and the terrible price of being truly seen by something that should never have been acknowledged. So dim the lights, put on your headphones, and whatever you do, don't look away. Sarah Mitchell had always been the practical type, the kind of person who planned her routes, kept her car maintenance up to date, and left for work 15 minutes early to avoid traffic. For 3 years, she'd driven the same path home from her accounting firm, Highway 7. Through downtown, past the shuttered movie theater and the 24-hour diner, left on Maple Street where the old church stood, and finally onto Riverside Drive where her small rental house waited. 35 minutes, door to door. She could drive it with her eyes closed, knew every pothole, every traffic light, every place where deer might dart across the road at dusk. It was predictable, safe, familiar. The kind of routine that let her mind wander while her hands did the work of steering and shifting. She'd heard about the old hill road, of course. Everyone in town had. It cut straight through the heart of Blackwood Forest, a relic from the 1950s when the logging company needed a direct route to transport timber down from the hills. The road was still maintained, technically still open, but you'd never know it from how empty it sat. No streetlights. No houses. Just 2 lanes of cracked asphalt winding down through trees that had been old when her grandparents were young. Sarah had driven past the turnoff 1,000 times and never once considered taking it, not because she believed the stories, but because she simply never needed to. October 31st started unremarkably. Sarah had worn a subtle Halloween sweater to work, orange with a small black cat embroidered on the shoulder, the kind of festive gesture that felt appropriate for an office environment. She planned to leave at her usual time, maybe stop by the grocery store to pick up the discounted candy she knew would be on sale after the trick-or-treaters finished their rounds. But at 4:30, just as she was shutting down her computer, the system crashed. Not just her computer, the entire network. 3 months of financial records that should have been automatically backed up to the cloud were suddenly inaccessible, and her boss was standing in the doorway with that expression that meant someone's evening plans were about to be ruined. Sarah and 2 co-workers spent the next 6 hours manually retrieving and backing up files, their fingers cramping, their eyes burning from staring at screens filled with endless columns of numbers. By the time the last file was saved and verified, it was 11:28 p.m. The office was dark except for their small circle of desk lamps. The rain had started sometime around 10, and now it hammered against the windows with the kind of violence that made you grateful to be inside. Sarah walked to her car alone, her co-workers having left through different exits. The parking lot was a black mirror, reflecting the few remaining lights in fractured, dancing patterns. She sat in her car for a moment, engine running, wipers beating against the windshield, feeling the exhaustion settle into her bones. All she wanted was her bed. Her warm, comfortable bed with the memory foam pillow and the weighted blanket that made her feel safe. The thought of adding another 35 minutes to this endless day felt unbearable. That's when she remembered the hill road. 15 minutes. Maybe less in this weather with no traffic. She'd be home before midnight, in bed by 12:15. The decision felt reasonable, logical even. What was the point of avoiding a perfectly good road because of stories told by people who probably hadn't driven it themselves? Sarah checked her mirrors, pulled out of the parking lot, and at 11:32 p.m., she turned onto the lonely road down the hill. The difference was immediate and wrong in a way Sarah couldn't quite articulate. The moment her tires left Highway 7 and met the asphalt of the hill road, the world seemed to shift. The streetlights that had lined the main road vanished as if someone had drawn a border between civilization and whatever this place was. Her headlights, which had seemed perfectly adequate moments before, now felt weak and insufficient, barely carving a narrow tunnel through the darkness that pressed against her windows. The trees closed in on both sides, their branches interlocking overhead to form a canopy so thick that even the rain seemed to fall differently here, heavier somehow, more deliberate. Sarah's hands tightened on the steering wheel as she felt the road begin its descent, that peculiar sensation in your stomach when gravity shifts and pulls you forward faster than you intend to go. She eased off the accelerator, suddenly aware of how alone she was, how the forest seemed to swallow sound, how her engine's hum felt muffled and distant. The radio had been playing pop music, something cheerful and mindless that filled the silence, but now static burst through her speakers like a swarm of angry insects. Sarah reached for the dial, but before her fingers made contact, she heard something underneath the white noise. Whispers. Dozens of overlapping voices speaking in tones too low and distorted to understand, but unmistakably human, unmistakably urgent. Her skin prickled with goosebumps as she punched the power button, and the silence that followed felt even worse than the static had been. If you're enjoying this story so far, do me a favor and hit that like button. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time because trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever driven down a road that just felt wrong? I want to hear your stories. Sarah's eyes were locked on the road ahead, her peripheral vision catching the endless repetition of tree trunks sliding past in the darkness, when her headlights suddenly illuminated something that didn't belong. A shape. A person. A woman standing perfectly still in the center of the road. Sarah's foot slammed the brake pedal so hard she felt the impact in her hip. The tires screamed against wet asphalt, the car shuddering and sliding, hydroplaning for what felt like an eternity before finally stopping just 3 feet from the freeway. Sarah's heart was a wild thing in her chest, hammering so violently she could feel it in her throat, in her temples, in her fingertips still gripping the wheel. The woman didn't move. She stood there in a white dress that seemed to glow with its own faint luminescence, as if the fabric had absorbed every particle of light that had ever touched it and was now releasing it back into the darkness. The dress clung to her thin frame, soaked through, and her long dark hair hung in wet ropes that obscured most of her face. Water dripped steadily from her hair, her clothes, her fingertips, forming a puddle around her bare feet that reflected Sarah's headlights. But it was her eyes that made Sarah forget how to breathe. They reflected the light like an animal's eyes, two perfect discs of bright white where human eyes should have been dark with pupils and iris and all the normal things that made a person a person. Sarah's voice came out as a whisper. "What are you?" Then louder, through the crack in her window she didn't remember opening. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" The woman's head began to tilt, slowly, mechanically, impossibly far to the side. And then she smiled. That terrible smile that revealed too many teeth, too white, too sharp, stretching wider and wider until it seemed to split her face in half. Sarah screamed, threw the car into reverse, but in that heartbeat between intention and action, the woman simply vanished, leaving only rain and darkness and empty road. Sarah doesn't remember the rest of that drive. She knows she must have continued down the hill, must have reached the bottom where the road reconnects with familiar streets, must have navigated the turns to her house and pulled into her driveway, but those minutes have been erased from her memory as if someone took scissors to the film of her life and cut out everything between the woman's disappearance and the moment she stumbled through her front door at 11:53 p.m. She locked every lock, something she rarely bothered with, and drew every curtain closed before collapsing on her couch still wearing her jacket and shoes. Her hands were shaking. She told herself it was exhaustion, stress, the combination of a 14-hour workday and driving in dangerous conditions. She'd imagined it. Had to have imagined it. People don't just vanish into thin air. Women don't stand in the middle of roads during rainstorms smiling with mouths full of too many teeth. These things existed in movies, in stories, in the overactive imaginations of tired minds pushed too far. By the time Sarah climbed into bed an hour later, she'd almost convinced herself of this rational explanation. Almost. The next morning arrived with sunshine and birdsong, and in the generous light of day, the previous night felt like a fever dream. Sarah went to work, fielded questions about why she looked so tired, and came home to her normal evening routine of microwave dinner and mindless television. Everything was fine. Everything was normal. Until 11:47 p.m. She was nearly asleep when the tapping started. Soft at first, rhythmic, deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. Against her bedroom window. Sarah lay frozen, telling herself it was a branch, just a branch blown by wind, but when she finally worked up the courage to pull back her curtain, she saw it. A handprint pressed against the outside of her second-story window. The glass was fogged with condensation as if something warm had been breathing on it, and the handprint was wet, water dripping down from the palm and each individual finger, leaving trails that caught the moonlight. Sarah watched, unable to move or scream or do anything but stare, as the handprint slowly slid down the window before disappearing entirely. She didn't sleep that night, or the next, because the tapping came again at exactly 11:47 p.m., this time on her bathroom window, and the night after that on the kitchen door. Always the same time. Always leaving those wet handprints that defied explanation. But there were other signs too, things Sarah couldn't dismiss as her imagination. She started seeing the white dress in her peripheral vision. A flash of pale fabric in the corner of her eye while brushing her teeth. A shape reflected in her darkened television screen that vanished when she turned to look directly at it. A figure standing at the end of her hallway, there for half a heartbeat before disappearing. Then came the message. Sarah was driving to work, trying to focus on the road and not on the fact that she was running on 2 hours of sleep, when her rearview mirror began fogging up despite the warm morning. She watched in horror as words formed in the condensation, traced by an invisible finger. "You saw me." She pulled over on the shoulder, her whole body shaking, but when she looked again the mirror was clear and dry. That night, Sarah did what she should have done immediately. She researched. She found newspaper archives, local history forums, old police reports. The Hill Road had a history soaked in tragedy. 7 women had died there over the past 40 years under circumstances that defied logical explanation. Cars found abandoned with engines running and drivers simply gone. Bodies discovered days later in the forest with expressions of pure terror frozen on their faces. And the survivors, the few who'd encountered something on that road and lived to speak of it, they all described the same thing. A woman in white. A smile too wide. Eyes that reflected light like an animal's. One account from 1987 made Sarah's blood turn to ice. A truck driver had swerved to avoid the woman, crashed, and while trapped in his vehicle, watched her approach and press her face against his window. He survived. But 6 months later he killed himself. His suicide note contained only 4 words: "She won't stop watching." 3 weeks have passed since that night on the Hill Road, and Sarah Mitchell is no longer the practical, put-together woman she used to be. Her co-workers have noticed. They see the dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer can hide, the way she flinches at reflections in the office windows, how she started taking the stairs instead of the elevator because the mirrored walls make her feel like something is watching from impossible angles. Her sister called yesterday, voice full of that careful concern that people use when they're trying not to say the words mental breakdown out loud, suggesting maybe Sarah should take some time off, talk to someone, get help. But how do you explain to the people you love that you're not losing your mind, that what's happening to you is real, when the evidence only exists for you? Because that's the cruelest part of Sarah's new reality. She sees the woman everywhere now. Standing at crosswalks when she's waiting at red lights, always on the opposite corner, always in that white dress, always dripping water onto dry pavement. In the grocery store, watching from behind displays of cereal boxes and canned goods. Reflected in bathroom mirrors at restaurants, standing just over Sarah's shoulder with that impossible smile. At the gas station. In parking lots. Once, horrifyingly, standing at the foot of her bed when she woke at 3 a.m., just watching with those reflective eyes until Sarah screamed and turned on the light, finding nothing but empty space and wet footprints on her carpet that disappeared as she stared at them. Sarah has tried everything. A priest came to bless her house, walking through each room with holy water and prayers, but the woman appeared in the priest's car window as he drove away, and he won't return Sarah's calls anymore. She's burned sage until her smoke detector screamed. She's worn every protection charm and crystal the occult shop downtown could sell her. She even contacted a paranormal investigation team who spent 6 hours in her house with their equipment, their meters and recorders and thermal cameras, finding absolutely nothing because the woman isn't haunting the house. She's haunting Sarah. The worst moments are when Sarah tries to show other people. When she's walking with a friend and sees the woman standing under a streetlight, pointing frantically and saying, "There, right there, do you see her?" Only to watch her friend's face fill with worry and confusion because they see nothing but an empty sidewalk. Sarah has stopped trying to make people understand. She's accepted that this is her life now, this constant presence that no one else can perceive, this entity that watches her every moment with patient, hungry attention. Last night, lying awake because sleep feels dangerous now, Sarah finally understood what the woman wants. Not her life, not in any physical sense. The woman wants something more fundamental than that. She wants to be acknowledged. For decades, maybe centuries, she stood on that road waiting for someone to truly see her, to stop and look and confirm her existence. And Sarah did exactly that. She didn't just glance and drive past. She stopped. She called out. She looked directly into those terrible eyes and in doing so, created a connection that can't be severed. Sarah understands now why that truck driver killed himself. It's not the fear that destroys you, though the fear is constant and exhausting. It's the knowing. The absolute certainty that you will never be alone again, that privacy is an illusion, that every moment for the rest of your life will be lived under the gaze of something that shouldn't exist but does. Sarah still goes to work, still pays her bills, still maintains the appearance of a normal life. But if you look closely, you'll see the truth in her eyes. The haunted, sleepless desperation of someone who made one wrong turn and discovered that some roads don't just lead somewhere different. They lead somewhere you can never leave. The woman in white is still with her, still watching, still smiling, and she always will be. Sarah Mitchell still lives in the same small rental house on Riverside Drive, still works at the same accounting firm downtown, still drives past that turnoff to the Hill Road every single day. But she takes Highway 7 now, always, even when traffic is backed up for miles, even when construction adds an extra 30 minutes to her commute, even when every rational part of her brain says a different route would be faster. Because Sarah has learned what some lessons cost to understand. She's learned that time saved isn't always time gained, that efficiency can carry a price tag written in currencies you didn't know existed. She's learned that some roads promise you something they never intended to deliver, and by the time you realize the truth, you're already too far down them to turn back. The old-timers in town, the ones who've lived here their whole lives and carry the weight of local history in their bones, they understood this instinctively. They knew why the Hill Road sat empty despite being perfectly maintained, why no one took that shortcut even when it would save them precious minutes. They knew that some places exist in the spaces between the world we understand and the world we pretend doesn't exist, and that these places have rules we can't comprehend and appetites we can't satisfy. The woman in white wasn't always on that road. Sarah discovered this in her desperate research, piecing together fragments of local history that no one wanted to talk about openly. In 1952, a young woman named Elizabeth Cartwright was found dead at the bottom of the hill, her body discovered 3 days after she'd gone missing. The official report said she'd lost control of her vehicle in a storm, but her car was found at the top of the hill with the engine still running and the driver's door wide open. Elizabeth had walked down that hill in the middle of the night, in the pouring rain, and no one knew why. No one except the handful of people who'd seen her since, standing in the road, wearing the same white dress she'd worn to a dance the night she disappeared, waiting for someone to truly see her. Every person who stopped, every person who acknowledged her presence instead of driving past, every person who confirmed that yes, she was real, she existed, she was there, they all became tethered to her. Connected by invisible threads that tightened with each passing day until the only way to escape was to stop existing yourself. Sarah won't do that. She's stronger than the truck driver, stronger than the others who couldn't bear the constant watching. But strength doesn't mean freedom, and survival doesn't mean victory. If you look at Sarah now, really look, you can see what this experience has taken from her. The lightness in her step is gone. The easy smile she used to wear has been replaced by something more guarded, more careful. She doesn't make eye contact with reflections anymore. She keeps her curtains drawn even during the day. She started sleeping with every light in her house turned on, the electricity bill be damned, because darkness feels too much like an invitation now. Her friends have mostly drifted away, uncomfortable with her strange new behaviors and her refusal to explain what happened. Her family still calls, still tries to maintain connection, but the conversations are strained and awkward because how do you bridge the gap between their reality and hers? Sarah exists now in a state of permanent vigilance, always aware of her surroundings, always checking corners and shadows, always bracing for that flash of white fabric in her peripheral vision that means she's being watched again. And she's being watched. Always. The woman appears less frequently now than she did in those first terrible weeks, but Sarah knows this doesn't mean she's gone. It means she's settled in, made herself comfortable, claimed Sarah as permanent territory. This is what happens when you take the wrong shortcut. This is the cost of choosing convenience over caution, speed over safety, the unknown path over the familiar one. Sarah's story isn't unique, though most people don't survive it long enough to serve as warnings. All over the world there are roads like this. Paths that promise to save you time, to get you where you're going faster, to cut through the tedious ordinary route and deliver you to your destination with minutes to spare. And on some of these roads something waits. Something that's been waiting for a very long time. Something that craves acknowledgement more than it craves anything else, because to be seen is to exist, and to exist is to have power over the one who sees you. Sarah saw. And now she can never unsee. So when you're driving late at night, exhausted and desperate to get home, and you notice a road you've never taken before, a dark road that everyone else seems to avoid, a road that promises to shave precious minutes off your journey, remember Sarah. Remember that she thought she was making a simple, practical decision. Remember that she believed the stories were just superstition. Remember that she's still out there right now, living every day with something watching her that no one else can see. And then take the long way home. Stay on the main roads. Trust the wisdom of the path everyone else takes, even if you don't understand why they take it. Because some shortcuts don't lead to your destination. They lead to something that will follow you for the rest of your life, marking you, claiming you, reminding you with every wet handprint and every reflected smile that you made a choice, and choices have consequences that don't expire just because you wish they would. If this story has left you unsettled, good. That means you'll remember it the next time you see a dark road promising an easier path. Hit that like button if you're never taking an unfamiliar shortcut again, and subscribe to Miss Creepy Face for more tales from the shadows. Drop a comment below and tell me about the roads you avoid in your town, the places everyone knows to stay away from even if they can't quite explain why. I read every single comment. Until next time, my lovely night dwellers, keep your eyes on the familiar path, trust your instincts when something feels wrong, and remember that the fastest route isn't always the safest one. This is Miss Creepy Face, reminding you that some destinations are worth the extra time it takes to reach them. Stay safe out there. And whatever you do, don't stop for anyone on the lonely road down the hill. This is a fictional story created for entertainment. All characters, names, locations, and events are entirely imaginary.